Welcome to the Plain Books Podcast.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
I am genuinely thrilled you are joining us for this episode today because, honestly, we are embarking on a mission that is going to completely shatter the way you look at business.
Oh, absolutely. It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. We are exploring an uncompromising, high-stakes blueprint for building massive wealth, and we're focusing entirely on this book, Your First 100 Million by Daniel S. Peña.
Right, and we need to set the stage for you right out of the gate here.
Yeah, because when I first looked through this, I was honestly a bit taken aback by how aggressive the tone was.
It pulls absolutely zero punches.
None.
Yeah.
If you clicked on this podcast expecting a gentle, feel-good seminar on how to manifest money by smiling at yourself in the mirror.
Or how to achieve perfect work-life balance.
Exactly. You are in the exact wrong place. This book is the absolute antithesis of modern conventional self-help.
It is. It's a brutal, raw, and unapologetic methodology known as the Quantum Leap Advantage, or QLA.
And to give you an idea of the sheer scale of what we are dealing with here, Daniel S. Peña took an $820 investment, a telephone, and a leased fax machine sitting in his kid's bedroom.
Just think about that starting point.
Right. And he turned it into a $400 million energy empire.
And the kicker is, he did this in a collapsing market.
A completely collapsing market. So I want to challenge you right now, as you listen to this episode, set aside every preconceived notion you have about money.
Leave it at the door.
Set aside what you've been taught about success, fairness, and what it takes to win. Clear your mind of the polite boardroom rules of business, because we are going to meticulously tear them down.
That is exactly the right mindset to have as we begin. The tone of this book is radically different from your standard sanitized business literature.
It's not a dry checklist.
No, it's not merely a dry checklist of administrative steps to incorporate an LLC. What we are really examining today is the intense psychological warfare required to succeed in what the author accurately describes as a kill-or-die corporate environment.
Kill or die. I mean, those are his exact words.
Yes, it is about a fundamental, often painful rewiring of how you perceive risk, how you handle crippling fear, and what you're genuinely willing to sacrifice when the chips are down.
Okay, let's unpack this because the very first major theme of this book hits you right between the eyes. Peña has an absolute pure disdain for what we call conventional wisdom.
He hates it.
He actually refers to it repeatedly as the leaser's crutch. He argues that common sense is nothing more than an excuse for mental laziness.
It's the ultimate alibi.
Right. It's the alibi people use when they screw up, or more often, when they're just too afraid to take a massive life-altering risk. I mean, think about the phrase common sense. We use it as a compliment.
Sure, we say someone has good common sense.
But Peña points out that if we were all born, raised, and educated under completely identical circumstances, maybe common sense would actually exist as a reliable baseline. But we aren't.
We come from wildly diverse backgrounds.
With different fears and different traumas. So relying on the collective, average thinking of the masses is the fastest, most guaranteed way to achieve average results.
And average results are not $100 million.
Not even close. He says that your own mind, preconditioned by this conventional thinking, the idea that you have to work 40 hours a week, save 10% in a mutual fund, and retire at 65, is actually your greatest limiting factor.
What's fascinating here is how he illustrates that psychological barrier, moving it from an abstract concept to a concrete reality. The author uses a brilliant historical example to anchor this idea.
The Roger Bannister story.
Exactly. The story of Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. Let's really look at the context of that moment. Before 1954, it wasn't just that nobody had run a mile in under 4 minutes.
People thought it would kill you.
They literally did. It was widely accepted by the global medical and athletic communities that doing so was a physical impossibility. It was conventional wisdom that the human heart would simply explode under the strain.
Or your lungs would completely collapse.
Right. It was a universally accepted limitation of human biology. But the moment Bannister broke that mental and physical barrier, finishing in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds, what happened?
The floodgates opened.
The very next month, Australian John Landy did it. And soon after, a rapidly growing list of high school, college, and professional runners were conquering the so-called impossible.
And it's not like human evolution suddenly jumped forward in a single month.
Exactly. The physical reality of the human body hadn't changed at all. The psychological barrier had been destroyed.
So when Peña talks about the danger of conventional wisdom, he's pointing out that we all have these artificial 4-minute miles constructed in our minds about what we can achieve financially.
We've been told you can't do that, or that's too risky.
So many times by well-meaning parents, teachers, and friends that we've accepted it as an immutable law of physics. We internalize the fears of average people.
Which is incredibly dangerous if you want to be exceptional.
And that brings us to one of the most raw, unfiltered quotes in this entire book. Peña writes, "Victory in business, like war, comes to the toughest son of a bitch in the valley."
He absolutely refuses to sugarcoat it.
He does. We live in an era where success has become this incredibly watered-down subjective cliche. People say, well, I'm successful because I feel good about myself.
Or I have inner harmony.
Yeah, a balanced lifestyle. Peña argues that's completely backwards if you are aiming for the absolute pinnacle of wealth. He defines success in terms of the universally accepted quantifier, which is cold, hard cash.
He says if you want to feel good about yourself, go make a massive amount of money, and then you'll feel good.
Super success is not for the touchy-feely. It's not about being comfortable or making sure everyone likes you. It's about pushing yourself into an arena where you are constantly ruthlessly tested.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it introduces a core, non-negotiable concept he calls the pay price to action.
Pay price to action.
Yes. To achieve the extraordinary, you have to forfeit the ordinary. You cannot have both. The author details the incredible story of American swimmer Michael Phelps at the 2008 Beijing Olympics to drive this home.
8 gold medals.
8 gold medals. Phelps didn't just casually show up, jump in the pool, and win because he was naturally talented. The book outlines his monastic, almost brutal regimen. He sacrificed the entire carefree life of a normal teenager.
Let's break down what that actually looks like.
Well, his typical 18-hour day started at 5 o'clock in the morning, every single day, regardless of weekends or holidays. He spent hours staring at the black line at the bottom of the pool,
Enduring the smell of chlorine, the physical exhaustion.
consuming 12,000 calories just to keep his body from cannibalizing its own muscle. Every minute of his life was scheduled to maximize performance.
He actively avoided friends, family gatherings, anything that might divert his attention.
And when some well-meaning people suggested making his schedule slightly less strenuous to avoid burnout, Phelps' response was basically, if you can't get up to swim in the morning, don't go.
That is the true essence of the pay price to action.
He gladly gave up his youth to become an immortal Olympic legend. Peña demands that you ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. What are you actually willing to sacrifice for your quantum leap?
Because when Peña was building his massive energy fortune, he candidly admits he was rarely home. He missed 242 days of his daughter's first year of life.
That is a heavy, sobering price.
It is. Now, I have to push back on that a little bit because that is an intense pill to swallow. Is missing 242 days of your child's first year genuinely a fundamental requirement for super success?
Or is it a rationalization for toxic workaholism?
Right. There are billionaires out there who make it a point to eat dinner with their kids every night. Do we really have to accept that massive exponential wealth strictly requires abandoning your family or adopting an 18-hour daily grind until you drop?
That is a highly valid point of contention, and it's essential to look at it objectively. Is it a universal law of physics that you must ignore your family to make $100 million? No.
Okay.
However, Peña's argument isn't about setting a moral standard. It's about playing the statistical probabilities in a hyper-competitive arena.
The leverage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His thesis is that when you are starting with nothing, like his $820 in a fax machine, and you are going up against entrenched corporate titans with limitless capital, the only true leverage you have is your capacity to outwork, outendure, and out-obsess them.
Because if your competitor is working 14 hours a day and you are working 8 hours because you want work-life balance...
Over a 5-year timeline, the compound interest of their extra effort will completely crush you. Peña is forcing the reader to strip away the romanticized version of entrepreneurship.
He's saying if you want what the top 0.001% have, you have to be willing to do what the 99.999% find utterly abhorrent.
Whether that personal cost is worth it is a decision every individual has to make for themselves, but he insists you cannot lie to yourself about the price tag.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it as leverage. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means you have to stop thinking that high performers are just intellectually superior to everyone else.
That is a huge misconception that the book actively shatters.
People naturally assume you need a genius-level IQ. that you need to be the smartest person in the room to build a $100 million company. Peña argues you absolutely don't.
In fact, he says an average IQ of 100 is plenty.
And sometimes a higher IQ is a detriment because geniuses overanalyze and fail to take action. What high performers actually rely on are rigorously practiced skills, sheer audacity, and the unstoppable force of highly cultivated habits.
It's not about natural brilliance. It's about wanting it more than the competition and being willing to pay a price that the competition finds completely unacceptable.
Precisely. And this brings us to the actual mechanics of how one prepares for that level of success, which leads directly into the concept of the comfort zone.
A term we throw around so casually today that it's lost its meaning.
But the author learned it directly from the man who coined it, Jim Newman.
Yes, Jim Newman. He was one of Peña's 3 key mentors, a brilliant behavioral scientist who founded the PACE-E organization.
It was after attending one of Newman's intense seminars in 1978 that Peña found the psychological courage to move out of his incredibly lucrative but ultimately limiting comfort zone as a broker at Bear Stearns.
To venture out into the unknown and become a super successful oil man, Newman taught him that a comfort zone isn't a fixed genetic trait. It's exactly like a thermostat on a wall, and you can consciously, mechanically expand it.
I love how actionable this part of the book is. Let's really dig into this thermostat analogy. If your financial thermostat is set to, say, $50,000 a year and you suddenly win $100,000, what happens?
Your subconscious mind panics.
It says, it's too hot in here, we don't belong at this temperature. So you start making terrible decisions. You buy a depreciating asset like a flashy car, you make a bad investment, you loan money to a flaky relative.
Until your bank account drops right back down to $50,000.
And your subconscious says, back to normal. Peña understood this perfectly. He didn't just sit around in a lotus position meditating on wealth. He actively, aggressively practiced it. He literally practiced being successful to manually turn up his thermostat.
He shares this amazing personal anecdote where, long before he had massive wealth, he joined an incredibly exclusive country club he couldn't really afford.
Just so he could hang out with retired ultra-wealthy CEOs.
He didn't pitch them. He just wanted to hear how they talked. He wanted to see how they reacted to stress, how they conducted themselves with waitstaff, what they worried about.
He bought a Rolls Royce and a Mercedes when he probably should have been saving that money. He would drive through the most expensive, exclusive neighborhoods in his city, slowly looking at the massive mansions, visualizing himself walking through the front door.
Practicing the visceral feeling of being comfortable in that environment.
He knew that if he was going to operate at a 100-story high level of business, he couldn't get vertigo when the elevator finally got up there. He had to already be used to the altitude.
That concept of practicing success is profoundly psychological and heavily supported by modern behavioral science. It's about ensuring that when the big moment inevitably arrives, the multi-million-dollar negotiation, the bank meeting, you don't subconsciously sabotage yourself.
Because deep down, you feel like an imposter who doesn't belong.
Exactly. Peña writes extensively about how, in the high-stakes corporate world, perception literally becomes reality. He emphasizes the absolute critical importance of making a flawless, intimidating first impression.
He details his strategy of buying the absolute finest bespoke suits. He wasn't doing this out of pure vanity, it was armor.
It was a calculated business expense.
To ensure that the moment he walked into a banker's office, the banker immediately registered him as a peer or even a superior. But even more interestingly than the suits, he completely refuses to carry business cards.
Oh, that is such an incredible power move.
When I read that, I was mind blown. He asks the reader, "Do you think Ted Turner carries business cards? Or the biggest tycoons in real estate? No."
The super successful don't hand out little flimsy pieces of cardboard like mid-level salespeople desperately begging for a follow-up.
When someone asks Peña for a card, he just says, "Have your secretary call my office. They know exactly where to reach me." It's about establishing a commanding, unshakable presence from the very first second of interaction.
It flips the dynamic.
Yeah.
You aren't chasing them. They have to figure out how to reach you.
He argues that massive amounts of money naturally gravitate to those who know how to handle it with absolute class and unapologetic confidence.
And part of learning how to handle that power and money is finding the right people to guide you. The book places immense, almost paramount value on mentorship.
We mentioned Jim Newman, but there were others.
Yes. Peña also details his foundational relationship with Konstantin Kostagratsos. Costa was a legendary figure who made his massive fortune as a lifelong associate of the legendary shipping tycoon Aristotle Onassis.
Costa became Peña's first true mentor.
He spent years teaching him how to swim in the deep, dangerous waters of high-level global business. Then there was Jerry Ormond, a tough, legendary Texas oil man who introduced Peña to the rough-and-tumble, incredibly high-stakes reality of the energy industry.
Based on these profound relationships, the author lays out very specific, uncompromising rules for choosing a mentor.
First, the person must be significantly more successful than you. Not just a little bit, but orders of magnitude more successful. They need to have been there, done that at the level you were trying to reach.
Second, you must genuinely like and respect them, and he clarifies that those are two completely different things. You can respect someone you hate, but mutual amicability and genuine fondness are required.
Otherwise, they won't actually share their real secrets with you.
Third, they should ideally be in your specific field, though he concedes this is not strictly mandatory if their general business acumen and network are elite.
And fourth, you should share common interests outside of the office. Some of the most lucrative, life-changing advice Peña ever received wasn't in a boardroom. It was while walking the golf course with these titans.
That's such a crucial takeaway for our listeners. You cannot reach the absolute pinnacle of success entirely on your own. You need someone who has already navigated the minefield, someone who knows where the bodies are buried and where the traps are set.
Absolutely.
So let's take a second here. I want you to actively participate in this conversation right now. I want you to mentally visualize your own comfort zone. What are the invisible walls you've built around yourself?
What is the income level? The specific type of high-end client, or the sheer size of the deal that currently makes your palms sweat just thinking about it?
Think of one specific, actionable way you can push the perimeter of that comfort zone today. Maybe it's making a cold phone call to a CEO you currently think is completely out of your league.
Maybe it's putting on your absolute best suit just to go sit in the lobby of a high-end investment bank to feel the environment.
Whatever it is, challenge yourself to consciously step outside that limiting box today.
Because stepping outside that box is going to be absolutely mandatory if you want to apply the next major paradigm-shifting concept in the book, which is financing your dream.
Because you cannot make a quantum leap using arithmetic growth.
The author takes great pains to explain the stark difference clearly. Arithmetic growth is 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 1 = 3. It's slow, it's linear, and it is exactly what conventional wisdom tells us to do.
Save a little portion of your paycheck, grow your small business by 1 or 2 clients a year, wait 40 years and hope inflation doesn't eat your savings.
But geometric exponential growth is what actually creates massive generational wealth. 10 times 10 is 100, 100 times 10 is 1,000. That is the quantum leap.
However, to achieve exponential growth, you hit a wall very quickly if you rely on your own savings. You almost always need massive capital injections. Specifically, you need OPM.
Other people's money.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a little provocative. Peña uses an analogy that is completely impossible to forget once you read it. He writes, and I am quoting directly from the text here, borrowing money from a bank is like having sex. You both want it, but they need reassurance of your intentions and foreplay.
It's a hilarious, shocking way to break the tension.
But it is incredibly deeply practical. Think about it. Most people are absolutely terrified of banks. They walk in with sweaty palms, a pounding heart, and a dry mouth, treating the loan officer like a Supreme Court judge who is about to hand down a life sentence.
But Peña points out the fundamental flaw in that thinking. Banks are in the business of lending money. That is their product.
They want to give it to you, just like a merchant wants to sell you groceries. If they don't lend money, they go out of business.
But you have to know how to approach them, how to confidently speak their specific financial language, and how to provide that professional foreplay.
You do that by demonstrating you are a high-performance individual. You bring flawless executive summaries, airtight pro formas, and you dress the part to instantly mitigate their perceived risk.
This raises an important question. If banks want to lend us money, why are we so universally afraid of asking for capital? The book addresses this deeply ingrained fear of rejection head-on.
He points out a stark, almost comical reality to diffuse this fear.
He cites a famous article titled, "What Kills Us?", which exhaustively listed the statistics for the most frequent causes of human death. Heart disease is number 1, followed by cancer and stroke.
But as the author Riley notes to his audience, not one single death in human history has ever been attributed to rejection by a banker. or indeed the rejection of any business deal.
Presenting a financial plan is simply not a matter of life or death, even though our lizard brains react as if a tiger is chasing us. The absolute worst thing they can do is say the word no.
And every single presentation you make, even if the loan officer laughs you out of the room and tears your business plan to shreds, is an invaluable learning opportunity. It's free practice.
It desensitizes you to the adrenaline spike of fear and gives you the feedback needed to refine your pitch for the next bank down the street.
Exactly. He actually tells his seminar attendees to go make presentations to banks constantly as a hobby. Don't wait until you desperately need payroll money on a Thursday afternoon to meet a banker for the first time.
That reeks of desperation, and banks can smell desperation a mile away.
Go when you don't need the money. Pitch a hypothetical deal, build the relationship, learn the exact probing questions they ask. He has a great saying, failure's testing, failure is learning.
If you aren't getting rejected on a regular basis, you simply aren't aiming high enough. You are playing it entirely too safe.
And when things do get tight, when the pressure is truly on, the business is on the line, Peña doesn't want you to run from that fear. He wants you to harness it as fuel.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of executive strategy, the author heavily draws on the ancient tactical wisdom of Sun Tzu from The Art of War.
Cornered animals.
Yes. Sun Tzu advised advancing generals not to press a desperate foe too hard or completely block a retreating enemy's escape route, because a cornered animal is the fiercest and will fight to the death with unimaginable ferocity.
Peña takes this ancient military doctrine and applies it directly to business by advising you to intentionally create dangerous opponents out of yourself and your executive team.
True high performers do not crumble in a crisis. They flourish in it. The adrenaline sharpens their focus. Progress often masquerades as severe trouble.
He absolutely despises how the modern corporate world tries to sugarcoat big existential problems by calling them challenges or growth opportunities.
He says, if you are in big trouble, have the raw respect for your executive staff to look them in the eye and say, we are in big trouble and we might not survive the week.
A true high performer operates best when the stakes are life-altering, when the bridge is completely burned behind them and they have no other choice but to push forward or perish.
It's the ultimate sink-or-swim mentality, dialed up to 1,000.
And to make sure you actually swim when you jump into those deep waters, he provides some of the most hard-hitting, practical advice in the book, what he affectionately calls his Peña-isms.
For example, when it comes to dealing with other people's money and making these massive multi-million-dollar deals, he insists on one unbreakable rule: investigate before you invest.
You cannot just jump in blind on a gut feeling. He says ignorance is a steep hill with jagged rocks at the bottom.
You have to do your exhaustive due diligence. You have to hire the best accountants to look at the books, consult your high-priced legal advisors, and know the numbers better than the person selling the business.
You are taking massive, terrifying risks, yes, but they are highly calculated risks based on months of exhaustive, paranoid preparation.
That meticulous, almost obsessive preparation is exactly what is required as we transition into Chapter 11, which is arguably the core thesis of the entire quantum leap methodology.
The author states emphatically that acquisitions are the true hidden secret to quantum growth.
You do not have to endure the agonizingly slow, painful process of building revenues from scratch, grinding away client by client, year after year. That is the arithmetic trap.
Instead, you can simply buy the revenues. You can instantly buy the market share, the customer list, and the established cash flow.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the part of the episode where we are going to look at one of the most suspenseful, cinematic, and inspiring stories in the entire text.
It perfectly illustrates how a tiny minnow can swallow an absolute whale if they use leverage correctly. Peña tells the incredible story of Casey Stevenson.
Now picture this. Casey was a 21-year-old kid in Hanford, California, who owned his own small, relatively unremarkable jewelry store.
He was working his fingers to the bone, grinding 80 hours a week, trying to grow by opening new, small locations one at a time, but he realized he was just perpetuating a grueling job for himself.
He was completely stuck in the mud of arithmetic growth. Then he attended one of Peña's intense seminars in 1993 and heard about this concept of quantum growth through acquisition. It completely rewired his brain.
Casey decided to take immediate action, and he didn't aim small. He targeted the acquisition of the absolute oldest, most prestigious jewelry store in the entire state of California.
This Target store was an institution, And it was 2.5 times the size of his own modest operation.
To the outside world, and according to every metric of conventional wisdom, this was absolute madness. A 21-year-old kid trying to buy out a historic institution more than double his size. It sounded like a joke.
To complicate matters further, the owner of the Target store had absolutely no interest in selling to Casey and actually didn't even care for him personally. He viewed him as an annoying upstart.
And if that wasn't enough opposition, the biggest jewelry store acquisition company in the United States, a massive corporate giant with deep pockets, was also trying to buy the exact same store, actively going behind Casey's back to secure the deal.
Talk about being a dangerous opponent backed into a corner. You have a
Yeah.
21-year-old kid against a hostile seller and a national corporate behemoth.
But Casey used the precise QLA methodology he learned. He remembered Peña's golden rule of negotiation. No means yes.
He didn't take the initial gruff rejection as final. Instead of getting discouraged, he got creative. He needed to figure out the exact financial mechanics to leverage the store's own assets to buy it.
So he formulated an offer that addressed the seller's true underlying desires. Alongside the purchase price, Casey offered the seller 50% of all profits during the first 90 days after the acquisition.
Now, how did he fund that? He planned a massive liquidation sale of the store's existing aging inventory.
He was basically using the store's own dormant assets to pay the owner. He soothed the seller's ego and pride with the promise of cold, hard, immediate cash from this liquidation.
And against all odds, he won. Against a massive national corporate entity, this 21-year-old kid closed the deal.
He bought the oldest jewelry store in California, tripling his revenues in a single year. And here is the absolute kicker that proves the entire methodology. He did it using absolutely zero of his own personal money.
It was 100% financed through the deal structure and OPM. It is the ultimate real-world proof of exponential growth.
It's a brilliant, flawless execution of the strategy, but to replicate that kind of staggering success, the author provides specific, rigid rules for acquisitions so you don't buy a sinking ship.
The first rule is stick to your knitting. You must look for a business in an industry where you already have deep expertise.
When you are taking over a new company, managing the stress of dealing with hostile lenders, and learning to be a true CEO instead of a manager, you absolutely do not want the massive added burden of learning the technical jargon, supply chains, and operational processes of a completely foreign industry.
If you run a landscaping company, buy other landscaping companies. Don't try to buy a software firm.
Second, look for highly fragmented industries dominated by mom-and-pop companies. You do not want to try consolidating an industry that is already dominated by 3 massive global conglomerates. They will crush you.
You want to find an industry with thousands of independent, aging operators looking to retire, like retail jewelry, building maintenance, or HVAC services.
And third, you must look for industries that historically enjoy a healthy profit margin, typically between 20 to 40%.
If you buy into a highly commoditized business with a razor-thin 3% profit margin, you are going to be agonizing over pennies and supply chain hiccups forever, and you'll never generate the excess cash needed for the next acquisition.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds here. I want to make sure I completely understand this, and I want our listeners to grasp the mechanics. How do you actually get these owners to sell to you, especially if they are resistant?
Sometimes, as in Casey's case, you use a highly creative structure to offer them a deal they can't refuse. You offer them what Peña calls a spoonful of sugar.
When someone has built a business from scratch over 30 years, it's not just an asset, it's their baby. It's their identity. They want to know it's in good hands.
So you have to manage their psychology. You give them instant credibility. You drop the names of your high-powered accounting firm or your aggressive corporate lawyers to show you are a serious player.
More importantly, you make their departure as honorable, dignified, and painless as possible. You might pay them a generous consulting salary for a specified time, say 2 years after the buyout, so they still feel important and have a place to go on Monday morning.
You give them cash up front, stock in the new parent company, or a combination. The most comforting balm for an entrepreneur's bruised ego, of course, is a massive pile of money.
That is the diplomatic approach. But the author also discusses in vivid detail what to do when the owner is completely stubborn, arrogant, and in deep denial about their company's poor financial health.
This is where the tactics become quite aggressive, and where the kill or die environment really shows its teeth. Let's walk through the mechanics of a hostile move.
Almost every struggling business has debt.
Let's say your target company has a $300,000 credit line with a local bank, and they currently have $60,000 outstanding that they are struggling to service.
As an outsider, you can go directly to the bank holding that paper and negotiate to purchase the note, the debt itself, at a premium.
You might offer the bank $70,000 for that $60,000 debt. The bank is thrilled. They get an immediate risk-free profit and get a struggling debtor off their books.
But suddenly, you own the debt of the company you want to buy. You are now their primary creditor.
You then go back to the reluctant owner, sit down, and ask them nicely one more time if they would like to sell. When they stubbornly say no, you calmly reveal that you now hold their note, and you are officially calling it in, demanding payment in full immediately.
It's a classic hostile takeover tactic. You are forcing the seller's hand by applying unbearable existential financial pressure. They either sell the company to you on your terms, or you force them into bankruptcy.
Wow. I mean, it is utterly ruthless. But mathematically, it is undeniably effective in that kill-or-die corporate environment. It's financial judo.
But okay, let's say you execute these strategies. You've acquired 2 or 3 of these companies. How on earth do you manage them all? You physically can't do it all yourself, no matter how many 18-hour days you pull.
This is where Peña introduces the critical concept of the dream team. The incredible paradox here is that to achieve massive exponential growth, you actually have to completely relinquish day-to-day operational control.
The rule of the quantum leap is less control, not more. You have
Yeah.
to hire elite people you trust, empower them with real authority, and let them perform without micromanaging their every move.
The author states clearly and unequivocally, you cannot grow exponentially by yourself. You need the support of others. You need a brilliant CFO, a ruthless COO, top-tier legal counsel.
And crucial to keeping that elite dream team motivated and loyal is sharing the wealth. You cannot make a quantum leap if you are acting like a tyrant, hoarding all the profits and paying your top executives a flat, mediocre salary.
You must offer equity in the holding company, stock options, warrants, or massive, life-changing cash bonuses tied directly to performance metrics. These are the tangible, undeniable rewards for performance and loyalty.
You are asking these high-level executives to work their weekends, to sacrifice their personal lives for your grand vision, and to endure the stress of rapid acquisition, so you absolutely must factor them into the financial windfall.
If you don't share the wealth generously with the people executing the plan, you will simply never retain a team capable of managing exponential growth. They will leave and become your competitors.
So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together? You've built your personal psychological foundation, you've conquered your comfort zone, you've successfully secured OPM from the banks, you've executed the acquisitions, and your dream team is running the day-to-day operations of this new empire.
What is the actual end game here? Are you just supposed to sit in the CEO chair until you're 90?
This brings us to the final major theme, and it is the ultimate reality check for any business owner. Peña says, succinctly and brutally, you only have 2 exit strategies in business. You die at your desk or you sell the company.
This raises an important question about the deeply ingrained psychology of the typical entrepreneur. Many small to medium business owners view their company as a literal extension of themselves. It's their identity.
They plan to hold on to it forever, passing it down to children who rarely actually want it.
But the author argues forcefully that the true high performer doesn't hang on to their first venture like a corporate teddy bear. The business is an asset, a vehicle for wealth creation, not a family heirloom.
Selling the company is the natural, necessary end of the cycle that began when you decided to make your quantum leap. Why sell? To free up massive amounts of trapped equity and turn it into liquid cash. Lots and lots of cash.
And here is a huge, surprising psychological barrier he breaks down in this section. The act of paying yourself. You'd think this would be easy, but many business owners plow every single cent of profit back into the company for years on end to buy new equipment, expand the warehouse, or hire more staff.
They actually feel guilty taking money out, as if they are betraying their own business or being selfish. Peña aggressively attacks this mindset.
He says, I can't emphasize enough that you as a company owner need to pull money out of the company to pay yourself so you can begin to enjoy the lifestyle that you and your family have earned through all that sacrifice.
Liquefying those assets and experiencing that massive sudden influx of millions of dollars in cash from a single transaction is what makes the entire quantum leap process habit-forming.
He actually calls the feeling of that massive wire transfer hitting your account absolutely erotic. It's the ultimate validation.
When you feel that level of success and freedom, you want to do it again, taking the lessons learned and acquiring a second, much larger company, or moving into a new industry entirely.
And this brings us directly to the culmination of the book, the final, demanding challenge the author issues to the reader. It is framed as an action war plan, and it comes with a strict, uncompromising ultimatum.
He writes, if you don't take action to begin your quantum leap within 21 hours after finishing this book, you never will.
Why specifically 21 hours? Because human motivation is incredibly fleeting. If you close the book, feel a temporary rush of inspiration, and say, wow, that was great, I'll start researching banks next week, the entropy of your comfortable, conventional life will inevitably drag you right back down.
The daily grind, the emails, the minor crises will consume you. The author knows from decades of mentoring that immediate physical action is the only true differentiator between a passive dreamer and a super success.
When values are clear, decisions are easy. That is a massive, life-altering takeaway from this final section.
If your true, unadulterated value is financial super success and generational wealth, then the decision to make that terrifying cold call, the decision to walk into that bank lobby in your bespoke suit, the decision to execute a hostile bid on a competitor, it all becomes crystal clear.
It removes the agonizing hesitation. Success at this level strictly requires making mistakes rapidly. You have to force yourself out of the middle of your cozy comfort zone, start taking highly calculated risks immediately, and deeply accept that failure isn't the opposite of success.
Failure is simply a required mechanism for gathering data and learning. It's the ultimate synthesis of his entire philosophy.
You cannot sit on the sidelines reading endless books, trying to figure out the perfectly safe secret to wealth, because there is no safe secret. There's only aggressive action, unyielding courage, and the absolute refusal to be bound by the artificial limitations that society constantly tries to place on you.
The business world is truly permanently divided into two camps. People with great, untested ideas, and people who take immediate, massive action on those ideas, regardless of the fear. Which side of the divide are you standing on right now?
Are you going to continue to be an armchair dreamer, analyzing the success of others, or are you going to take action today?
What if your greatest limitation all along hasn't been a lack of capital, a bad economy, or bad luck, but simply your blind obedience to the polite common sense you've been taught since childhood?
And here's a final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up this episode. If Peña's entire methodology requires exploiting the fear and common sense of others, buying their distressed debt, leveraging their fear of risk, utilizing their savings deposited in banks, what happens if everyone suddenly adopts the quantum leap advantage?
Does this aggressive strategy fundamentally rely on the existence of a vast majority who are too timid to act?
In other words, does super success inherently require a world of ordinary people to conquer and leverage? It's a fascinating, slightly unsettling implication of the kill-or-die corporate environment.
That is an incredible point to end on. We want to profoundly thank you for spending this time listening to the conversation today. It has been an incredibly intense journey through a very raw set of ideas, but we truly believe it's one that can completely redefine your trajectory if you apply it.
The strategies discussed here are certainly not for the faint of heart, but they are historically proven to generate immense wealth. The ultimate question is solely whether you have the fortitude to execute them.
So here is our direct challenge to you, the audience. We have 3 specific directives for you to take right now to begin your own 21-hour countdown. First, you absolutely need to purchase this book, Your First 100 Million by Daniel S. Peña. We have only scratched the surface of the mechanics today, and you need the full, detailed Quantum Leap Advantage Action War Plan found in its pages to execute this properly.
Second, we want you to actively engage with the author on social media. Tell him exactly how you plan to make your first quantum leap. Put your intentions out there publicly to hold yourself accountable.
And third, if you found immense value in this raw, unfiltered truth about super success, please follow, subscribe, and share the Playing Books podcast. Send this episode to a business partner, an ambitious friend, or anyone who desperately needs a wake-up call to break out of their arithmetic comfort zone. Challenge them to enhance their lives. Until next time, stay hungry, stay tough, and we will see you on the next episode of the Playing Books podcast.